Welcome to The Target, hosted by me, Dalton. Today, I'll be bringing you a pretty infamous Canadian case. I'll bring you the case of serial killer Michael Wayne McGray. He was an Ontario born, Nova Scotia raised, pretty infamous Canadian case. And what better to start with than this? I just want to give you guys a quick bear with me. I am sick, but I wanted to bring you guys an episode, get this podcast started. So I'm very excited about this project. I'm very excited about this case. Michael Wayne McGray has alleged 8 victims, confessed to some more, and has apparently been constantly fighting an urge to kill. So let's get right into it. Michael Wayne McGray, once boasted as being Canada's worst serial killer, was a Canadian serial killer who has killed at least 4 people and claims to have killed at least 16 people from 1985 to 1998. He's alleged to have killed people in Halifax, St. John, Montreal, Newfoundland, Ottawa, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and even Seattle. McGray was born in Collingwood, Ontario, but he grew up in Argyll, Nova Scotia. According to his own account, he was beaten by his alcoholic father and was physically and sexually abused in a reform school for boys in Shelburne, Nova Scotia. He was in and out of group homes, reform schools, so this account could be true, although it is coming from him. He's also quoted being said that he used to kill animals and get in fights all the time at school. Uh, End of the quote. McGray also claimed that as a boy he was fascinated with true crimes and serial killers, probably like many of us here today. So, in 1985, on April 24th, Elizabeth Gail Tucker, 17-year-old, was getting ready to move out of her mom's apartment after getting a job at a fish processing plant on the west coast of Nova Scotia. Her mother offered her money for the bus, but couldn't get it till the banks opened the following day. Deciding not to wait for the money, Elizabeth decided to hitchhike instead. She was seen getting into an old model car around 5 p.m. on that afternoon, April 24th, 1985. Several days later, her mom notified police that she has not been able to get into contact with her daughter for a few days, and over the next few months, police were tracking her movement, but no new leads came from it. And until about October 1985, 6 months later, a man walking his dog in a wooded area south of Wamouth makes a shocking discovery. The remains of what turned out to be 17-year-old Elizabeth Gail Tucker are found in that wooded area after being identified through dental records and some jewelry that was found on the scene. The autopsy done on Elizabeth was revealed that she was stabbed multiple times in the side by what appears to be a single-edged blade. Police at this point have 0 suspects, and eventually, after a few months leading, reaches a dead end. So years go by, and by 1998, the police have all but closed Elizabeth's case, but her mother insists the case stays open. She's insistent with the police that the case stays open, that one day they will find her daughter's murderer, and that's about that. Until March 1st, 1998, in Moncton, Nova Scotia, police are told by a witness that he has seen a brutal murder, and he ends up leading the police to an apartment building. And what the police arrive on, I think none of them ever expected. They arrive on a gruesome scene in the early morning hours, and they see 48-year-old Joan Hitz lying in a pool of her own blood, and they conclude that she had been beaten, strangled, and her throat had been slashed. They begin taping off the scene and looking for evidence, and they find what appears to be Joan's daughter Nina missing. After looking further through the house, they notice the spare bedroom has been slept in, but there's no sign of Nina. So after further looking, they open up the closet in the room, and what they find, I think none of them ever were prepared for. 11-year-old Nina Hitz hanging in the closet after what appears to have been smothered and killed. The scene was so gruesome that it has been reported by some of the investigators that they had to receive psychiatric help, and they had to send in a special psychiatric unit to help all the officers and investigators on the scene. Even some investigators say that that's a scene they'll never forget, none of them ever expected, no matter what happens, that they're so scarred from that scene of Nina Hitz hanging in that closet that they will never ever forget it. Glenn Bennett, the man who told the police he was there and witnessed these gruesome murders, leads the police to 22-year-old Tammy McLean's house, where the police are actually looking for her boyfriend, 34-year-old Michael Wayne McGray. Police arrest Wayne McGray and take him in to charge him for the murders of Joan and Nina Hitz. Little did they know, the worst was yet to come. So we go back to November 1987. A taxi driver picks up three men in the late hours after doing a night shift. These three men are Mark Gibbons, Norman Warren, and Michael McGray. After driving with the taxi driver for a while, Mark Gibbons lets the driver know that this isn't his normal drive and that they are robbing him. The taxi driver fights, and Mark Gibbon actually stabs the taxi driver in the hand, and all three men take off. But when searching for all three men, police find Mark Gibbons, but they find him stabbed under the heart, bleeding out, and dead on arrival. Police arrest Norman and McGray the next day, and McGray says Norman stabbed Mark for botching the robbery, and Norman was charged with the murder of Mark Gibbons, but after going to trial, he was actually, by everyone's surprise, found not guilty. But McGray and Norman were still sentenced for the attempted robbery. So we jump back to 1998, and McGray actually offers to make a plea deal with police and confesses to killing two gay men in Montreal. McGray was actually incarcerated at the time of these Montreal murders, and around this time, there was about 11 murders of gay men in the gay village in Montreal. And McGray was originally on a suspect list, but was taken off because he was actually incarcerated at the time, so they figured he couldn't have had anything to do with it. But McGray actually reveals that on Good Friday in 1998, or in Good Friday in 1991, he was let out on a 3-day pass, and he makes his required visit to a halfway house down in Montreal. The next day, he travels to the gay village in Montreal and meets Robert Asselet in a bar. After having a few drinks, Robert invites him back to his apartment, and they have a few more drinks. McGray falls asleep on the couch, and when he awakes the next morning, around 6 a.m., he hears Robert getting ready. So he grabs a knife from the kitchen and heads to Robert's room and orders him to lay down. Robert, laughing, thinking it's a joke, McGray grabs the lamp and then strikes him over the head, stabbing him multiple times, taking a bottle of whiskey and leaving. He leaves Robert's lair with all his belongings and everything, and then 24 hours later, McGray returns to Montreal's gay village and meets, sorry if I botched this name, Gaetan Etier, which is a French man in Quebec. Gaetan invites McGray back to his apartment, where Gaetan falls asleep. McGray watches him sleep the entire night, and then in the morning, McGray strikes him with a bottle and stabs him, leaving him there, and leaves Montreal, breaking his 3-day pass. The police eventually arrest him and send him back to jail for breaking that 3-day pass. In March 1999, after confessing to the two murders in Montreal, and then confesses to another murder, the murder of Mark Gibbons, his accomplice for the robbery. So we go back to that robbery where he tried to pin it on his other accomplice. He actually reveals that he was the one who killed him, and he reveals that after the three men were out there catching their breath, uh, McGray actually stabs Mark Gibbons and leaves him there for botching the robbery. But he also reveals that even when he first met Gibbons, he knew he did not like him and knew he would eventually end up killing or at least hurting. So we go to March 20th in 2000. Michael McGray actually pleads guilty to the murder of Joan Hitz and how he had the urge to kill anybody, it didn't matter. But he pleads not guilty to killing Nina Hitz, and Nina Hitz's trial is actually stayed, and they leave it. Michael McGray actually wanted to deal with police for information, but they turned him down, so he actually turned to the Canadian press to do an interview and to get public press out there. After talking to the public press for interview, a lot of them noticed that he was very emotionless, and he was actually quoted for saying that he was very good at killing. It was something he enjoyed doing, end quote. When he was actually asked if he had remorse during these interviews for the victims, his response being, "I'm not going to bullshit you. I don't. I don't regret it, and I don't have remorse." End quote. And the only thing he regrets is that it ended, and that he is also quoted saying he has an irresistible craving to kill. He was drifting from Vancouver to Halifax, stalking areas with prostitutes, junkies, and other easy target strangers that may not be taken seriously by police enough, makes for an easy prey. And a lot of analysis and psychoanalysts and even just people saying serial killers, they usually have a pattern. They have a pattern of their victims, they have a pattern of the way they like to kill, who the victims are. But Michael Gray didn't really fit this category because he just had a motivation to kill. He didn't care who he killed. It did not matter to him. The only thing that mattered was satisfying this urge and just killing. So we jump to May 23rd, 2001. Police in Halifax, Nova Scotia actually charged McGray with the murder of hitchhiker 16 years after her body was found on the side of the road near Digby, Nova Scotia. That victim, you guessed it, was 17-year-old Elizabeth Gale Tucker. She was murdered in 1985 while hitchhiking to her job at the fish plant. McGray admitted that she was his first murder. He admitted to stabbing her multiple times and dumping her body after picking her up hitchhiking. So, he actually admitted that him and another man were driving, and they saw her hitchhiking on the side of the road. They picked her up and were driving. After she refused to give him oral sex, he got mad, jumped out of the car, pulled her out, tried to pull her clothes off, and with her struggling, it annoyed him, and he stabbed her and left and dumped her body. Police do say that they have no evidence to find who is his accomplice in that murder, nothing linking anybody else, and a lot of officers believe that he actually didn't have an accomplice and he actually did it himself, but nobody really know, except Michael McGray. He was very, he was very short and to the point with his emotions in the plea as well. When he pled guilty to killing her, he kind of just said what he did. He stabbed her, dropped her body, nothing else. You can tell he clearly did not have remorse for the people he killed or who he was killing. And after that, he did going to trial. He ended up pleading guilty to the murder of Nina Hitz, but he still says that he would never hurt a child, and his accomplice, who was with him that day, is the one who committed the crime. So after 16 years, Mary finally gets closure on the death of Elizabeth Gale Tucker, and we finally get some answers to Nina Hitz with him pleading guilty. He was currently held at a maximum security prison in New Brunswick, and he had said that he would kill a guard or another prisoner or anyone to satisfy his uncontrollable urge to kill. And even his defense attorney said that that's not a false threat; that he definitely means that. And so, a few years later, Michael McGray was actually transferred to a medium security prison. So he was held in this maximum security prison where you're alone in a cell, single bunk, you're by yourself. He had requested to be transferred to a medium security prison, but after hearing you were double bunked with somebody at this medium security prison, Michael McGray actually turned it down twice. And then the third time, he actually decided to go. And on the 21st of November 2010, McGray tied his bunkmate Jeremy Phillips up with strips of torn bedsheet, beat him, stuffed a sock down his throat, and strangled him. Phillips actually lay dead in the cell for hours before McGray called the guards' attention to the body, and McGray immediately admitted to the murder. Now, Michael McGray has actually been retransferred to a supermax prison in Quebec, and judges and other people on rulings were actually trying to put in effect that other murderers had to be double bunked with murderers if they were to be double bunked. Michael Gray has over the years confessed to a total of 16 murders, which some of which he says he doesn't actually remember many details, or they were homeless or prostitutes, where he claims to have killed a man he met in Calgary or his Ottawa victim who was a prostitute. Um, Michael McGray doesn't really have a reason to lie. He seems really forthcoming about his murders. He almost seems proud of his murders and proud that he killed. So I feel like 16 murders is true. Like, why would he have a reason to lie if he confessed to all these other murders? But there's only about 8 that they have confirmed that, he actually did. So there's about another 8 murders that they can't really do anything, or he doesn't give enough details, just saying they were homeless people he stabbed and killed or prostitutes that they can't really find. But I mean, unless it's just for his own ego or own something, make him feel like he did more, killed more. I don't think he really has a reason to lie about these other murders. So I personally would probably think that 16 is probably the closer number that he did. And now Michael McGray has actually suggested that he's almost relieved to be behind bars. At night, he's actually said he has to contend with nightmares and he hears the voices of his victims. And said when he's awake, it's worse than when, and even when he's awake, but it's worse when he's asleep. He said he hears them calling, screaming his name. So I don't know if that means he has some sort of remorse, or maybe being in prison, he's able to think what he's done. Um, he's also been suggested saying he has demons, things like that. So a lot of people think he's definitely. I mean, it's not even up for debate to think. I think Michael Wayne McGray is definitely a psychopath, and probably definitely one of Canada's most prolific, infamous serial killers. Especially by the fact that he was so honest and so almost happy to share what happened and share his killings and just loved the fact that he killed. I think makes him almost more of a crazy case because he was so open about the murders and was willing to speak about everything and honestly gained nothing from it. The only thing he wanted was his accomplices to not be charged, and he also didn't want to be charged with more murders because he's already serving a life sentence. You can't just actually those ones honestly don't really matter. Obviously, the police turned that down, but that's the only thing he really wanted. So I definitely think he's an infamous serial killer. It's one of the worst candidates I've ever seen, and I'd be curious to see what you guys think about it. That was episode 1 of The Target featuring Michael Wayne McGray. I hope you guys did enjoy the episode. I know this is my first ever episode. I'm sick. It's a pretty shorter episode. I just did some quick research into the basically all the basic facts on his crimes and get to hear kind of what he did, what he said in his confessions, and kind of how it went through those 16 years in a quick, nice 20-minute ish episode for you guys. I hope you guys did enjoy that. Future episodes will be longer time for more research, maybe more cases with if there's obviously more killings or more things that happened or more info from police and other things we'll be able to throw in there. I did do some quick research on this as I was really excited to get an episode out to you guys. And with me being sick, I just wanted to make it a short, clean episode for you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. It is my first one. Bear with me. We'll get better at this. The podcast will be getting better week after week. But hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. And I hope you guys are as shocked and scarred with Michael Wayne McGray's crimes as honestly a lot of the rest of Canada was. He was a pretty crazy serial killer. And I hope you guys did enjoy it. And please, 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 guys, tune in next Tuesday for a very special Target episode. This episode was produced, filmed, and researched by me, Dalton, and we used a lot of good sources in this episode. We used the Canadian Encyclopedia, we used the Globe and Mail, we also used Stories, Season 3, Episode 2, The Homicidal Drifter, for a lot of our research. We looked